230 meters beneath the North Atlantic, the cameras on an ROV illuminate something that has been hidden in darkness for 8 decades. The hull number is barely visible through the marine growth, but when researchers confirm the identity, the expedition is immediately halted. This is not just another lost U-boat. This is the one that everyone thought had been sunk empty. Within 48 hours of penetrating the cargo hold, radiation detectors aboard the surface vessel trigger emergency protocols. The site is declared a contamination zone. 3 governments issue classified briefings. And the families of the crew who went down with this submarine in 1945 are told nothing. Because what investigators found inside rewrites everything we thought we knew about the final days of the Third Reich. The Norwegian research vessel Kronprins Haakon was not looking for U-boats when she found U347. The mission in June 2023 was geological mapping of the Rockall Trough, a deep basin west of Ireland where tectonic plates meet and the seabed drops away into cold darkness. Multi-beam sonar systems were scanning for seabed features when an anomaly appeared on the monitors. Something metallic, roughly 76 meters long, resting at a depth of 230 meters. Shipwrecks in this area are common. The North Atlantic devoured hundreds of vessels during 2 world wars. But this object had a distinctive profile. The sonar returns showed a pressure hull with a streamlined conning tower. A submarine. The team deployed a remotely operated vehicle equipped with high-definition cameras and environmental sensors. When the lights finally illuminated the wreck, researchers aboard the Kronprins Haakon knew they were looking at a German Type 10C U-boat, one of the largest submarine classes ever built by Nazi Germany. The hull number was still visible beneath decades of marine growth. It read U347. According to Royal Navy records, the submarine had been sunk on April 8, 1945 by depth charges from HMS Loch Killen. The attack had reportedly occurred in the North Sea, roughly 400 nautical miles from where this wreck was sitting. Either the records were wrong or this was not U347. But laser measurements of the hull matched the dimensions exactly. This was the right boat. She just was not where she was supposed to be. The first indication that something was seriously wrong came when the remotely operated vehicle's radiation detector began registering low-level gamma emissions near the forward cargo hatch. The readings were not dangerously high, but they were well above background levels for this depth and location. Within 6 hours, the Norwegian Radiation Protection Authority had been notified. Within 12 hours, intelligence services in London, Berlin, and Washington had been briefed. Within 24 hours, the expedition was ordered to mark the site with transponders and withdraw to a safe distance. The wreck of U347 had just become a classified national security issue. The official story begins to crumble. For 78 years, the story of U347 seemed finished. British naval records documented her final patrol with bureaucratic precision. She departed Kiel on March 20, 1945. She was assigned to the 7th U-boat flotilla. The mission profile was classified as a defensive patrol. Last confirmed contact came on April 7th. She was recorded as sunk by a depth charge attack from HMS Loch Killen on April 8th. All hands lost. The commander was Oberleutnant zur See Klaus Hartmann, 31 years old, a veteran of 3 previous patrols. The crew numbered 57 men. None survived. Case closed. Memorials were held. Names were added to casualty lists. Families grieved and moved on. Except the wreck, sitting 230 meters down in the Rockall Trough, told a different story. The North Sea is shallow. Its average depth is 90 meters. U347 was found in waters more than twice that deep, in a location 300 miles west of where she was supposed to have sunk. The hull showed damage, but not the catastrophic structural failure you would expect from a successful depth charge attack. The conning tower was intact. The pressure hull had breaches, but they appeared to be from internal explosions, not external compression. British Admiralty archives contain the action report filed by HMS Loch Killen. The destroyer reported multiple depth charge runs. Sonar contact was lost. Oil slicks and debris surfaced. The attack was classified as a probable kill and later upgraded to confirmed after no further contact with U347 was ever recorded. But probable kills were common in anti-submarine warfare. Sonar was unreliable. Oil slicks could be released deliberately by a submarine trying to fake its own death. And in April 1945, with the war entering its final chaotic weeks, verification procedures were not exactly rigorous. What if U347 had survived the attack? What if the boat had gone deep, rigged for silent running, and crept away while HMS Loch Killen searched for wreckage that would never come? The mission profile never made sense. Type 10C U-boats were not designed for defensive patrols. They were long-range cargo submarines built to transport strategic materials. They carried minimal torpedo armament compared to attack boats. They were slow, vulnerable, and expensive to operate. Sending one to patrol the North Sea in April 1945 was like using a freight train as a scout car. German naval archives captured after the war contain scattered references to U347, but her final mission orders are missing. The 7th U-boat flotilla command logs for March 1945 show her departure from Kiel, but provide no details about her cargo or destination. Standard procedure would have documented everything. The absence of paperwork is itself evidence that someone did not want this mission recorded. The official story relied on everyone accepting that U347 sank, where the Royal Navy said she sank, carrying nothing but torpedoes and fuel. The wreck in the Rockall Trough proved the location was wrong. The radiation readings proved the cargo was wrong. And once those two pillars collapsed, the entire narrative became suspect: the Type 10C and Germany's desperate final mission. To understand what U347 was doing in the Rockall Trough, you have to go back to 1942, when Nazi Germany realized it was losing the war. Not publicly, not officially, but strategically, the writing was on the wall. The Type 10C submarine was born from that desperation. These boats were never intended to hunt convoys or sink warships. They were designed to transport cargo across oceanic distances that conventional submarines could not reach. 76 meters long. Displacement of 1,500 tons surfaced. Range of 13,000 nautical miles at 10 knots. They could reach Japan without refueling. Germany built 4 of them: U-116, U-117, U-347, and U-234. Each was a strategic asset designed for a specific purpose. Moving materials, technology, and personnel between Germany and Japan when surface shipping lanes had been cut by Allied naval superiority. U-116 departed Lorient in March 1945, carrying mercury, optical equipment, and technical plans for the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. She never reached Japan. U-boat command lost contact in April. Her fate remains unknown. U-117 departed Kristiansand in April 1945 with a similar cargo. She was sunk by Allied aircraft in the Norwegian Sea. U-234 surrendered to American forces in May 1945. When U.S. Navy personnel opened her holds, they found 560 kilograms of uranium oxide packed in gold-lined cylinders. 560 kilograms. Enough fissile material to fuel multiple atomic weapons. The cargo was immediately transferred to the Manhattan Project. The critical detail that everyone overlooks is this: U-234 was captured by accident. She surrendered because the war ended while she was at sea. If she had departed 2 weeks earlier, she would have reached Japan. If her commander had chosen to scuttle instead of surrender, we would never have known what she carried. So the question becomes unavoidable. If one Type 10C was carrying uranium, what were the others carrying? The Nazis understood by late 1944 that Germany itself would fall. The question was whether Japan could be kept in the war long enough to force a negotiated peace. Technology transfer became the priority. Jet engine blueprints, rocket designs, infrared targeting systems, and most critically, uranium. The German nuclear program never produced a functional weapon. but it had access to uranium ore from mines in Czechoslovakia. Refining that ore into weapons-grade material was beyond German industrial capacity in the final months of the war, but it did not need to be. Japan had scientists. Japan had facilities. What Japan lacked was uranium. This was not speculation. This was policy. Kriegsmarine records captured after the war confirmed that long-range U-boats were tasked with transporting strategic materials to Japan. The uranium on U347 was not an isolated shipment. It was part of a program. And programs involve multiple missions, multiple boats, multiple cargo loads. U347 departed Kiel on March 20th. That is documented. What is not documented is where she stopped before heading into the Atlantic, or what was loaded into her cargo holds under cover of darkness. If U347 was carrying uranium, she was carrying Germany's last hope. Not for victory. Victory was impossible. But for leverage. She never made it. The attack by HMS Lochkillen was real. The damage was real. But U347 did not sink in the North Sea. She limped west. And somewhere in the Rockall Trough, her commander made the decision to surface, or to go down, trying. The boat went down, and the cargo that was supposed to change the war went down with her. Opening the hull, the lockdown, the decision to penetrate the wreck, took 3 weeks. Norwegian authorities consulted with nuclear safety experts. British intelligence reviewed classified files on German uranium shipments. German naval historians analyzed everything known about U347's final patrol. The consensus was cautious. The radiation readings were low. The risk was manageable. But no one wanted to proceed without strict protocols. On July 15, 2023, the Kronprinz Haakon returned to the site with an upgraded remotely operated vehicle, the ROV, equipped with manipulator arms capable of cutting through corroded steel. The team also brought radiation monitoring equipment far more sophisticated than the standard sensors that had first detected the gamma emissions. The ROV descended just after dawn. When the cameras found the wreck again, marine biologists aboard the research vessel noted how much life had colonized the hull. Sponges, barnacles, deep-sea corals clinging to the steel. This was not just wreckage. This was habitat. The forward cargo hatch was the target. Type 10C U-boats had 2 main cargo spaces. The radiation readings had come from the forward hold. The hatch was sealed, corroded, but intact. The ROV positioned itself carefully and began cutting through the locking mechanisms with a plasma torch. 15 minutes into the operation, the radiation detectors spiked. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The levels were still within safety margins, but they were climbing. Gamma radiation consistent with uranium decay. The hatch finally gave way after 23 minutes of cutting. The ROV's manipulator arms pulled the hatch open slowly, exposing the interior of the cargo hold for the first time since 1945. What the cameras revealed sent a wave of shock through the research vessel. The hold was filled with cylindrical containers, dozens of them, each roughly 1 meter long and 30 centimeters in diameter. They were packed tightly, stacked in rows, secured with steel bracing that had partially corroded. Some containers had breached, but many appeared intact, their seals still holding after 8 decades underwater. The ROV extended a sampling probe toward the nearest intact cylinder. The radiation detector immediately registered a sharp increase. The spectrometer analysis took 45 seconds to process. When the results appeared on the monitors, the reaction aboard the Kronprinz Haakon was immediate. Uranium oxide. The isotope signature was consistent with naturally occurring uranium that had been refined but not enriched to weapons grade. Each canister likely contained between 10 and 20 kilograms. With dozens of canisters visible in the hold, the total uranium load could exceed 400 kilograms. That was when the emergency protocols kicked in. Within 2 hours, the Norwegian Radiation Protection Authority had issued a hazard advisory for the site. Within 4 hours, NATO intelligence had been briefed. Within 6 hours, the expedition was ordered to withdraw and await further instructions. The lockdown was not about immediate danger. The radiation levels were low. The water itself provided shielding. The lockdown was about what the discovery represented. Proof that Germany had attempted to transport uranium by submarine in the final weeks of the war. Proof that at least one such shipment had failed. And proof that similar wrecks might exist elsewhere, with similar cargo still sitting on the seafloor, corroding, leaking, waiting. But the canisters were only the beginning. As the remotely operated vehicle continued its survey before withdrawing, the cameras captured something else. In the aft section of the hold, partially buried under collapsed bracing, were wooden crates marked with Wehrmacht stenciling. The markings were faded, but still legible. Optische Geräte, optical equipment. And below that, another word that made every intelligence analyst sit up straight. Kriegsgerät, war equipment. By the time the Kronprinz Haakon returned to port, the site had been declared off-limits. A 2 nautical mile exclusion zone was established. The coordinates were classified, and 3 governments began deciding what to do about a radioactive U-boat that had been sitting on the ocean floor for 78 years. The cargo manifest that never existed. The problem with U347 is that she should not exist. Not as a mystery. Not as an unknown. Every U-boat mission in World War II was documented. Departure dates, cargo manifests, crew rosters, fuel loads, destination ports. The Kriegsmarine kept meticulous records. Even in the chaos of 1945, even as Germany collapsed, the bureaucracy continued filing paperwork. But U347's final mission has no manifest. The documents that should exist in the Bundesarchiv Military Archive in Freiburg are not there. The 7th U-boat flotilla, logs for March and April 1945, contain entries for other boats. They list departures, patrol routes, supply transfers. U347 is mentioned once. Departed Kiel 20 March. No cargo listed. No destination listed. No follow-up entries. This absence is not an accident. Missing paperwork in German military archives is rare. The Allies captured enormous quantities of Nazi records at the end of the war. Entire trainloads of files. Some documents were destroyed by retreating German forces. Some were lost in bombing raids. But systematic gaps in U-boat logs are almost unheard of, because those logs were critical for coordinating operations. Standard procedure required every Type 10C departure to be accompanied by detailed cargo documentation, weight distribution charts to ensure proper trim, hazardous materials declarations, loading manifests signed by dockyard supervisors, destination codes, security classifications. For a boat like U347, carrying strategic materials on a long-range mission, the documentation should have been extensive. Instead, there is nothing. When a manifest is missing, it usually means someone removed it deliberately. And when that removal happens to a Type 10C cargo submarine that turns up 8 decades later carrying uranium, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Someone did not want this mission on record. The British archives are no help. HMS Loch Killen's action report survives. It describes the attack in detail. Sonar contact at coordinates 54 degrees north, 4 degrees east. Depth charges deployed. Contact lost. Oil slick observed. But there is no mention of any subsequent investigation into what U347 might have been carrying. What the British archives do contain, however, is a curious classified memo dated June 19, 1945. The document was declassified in 2010, but received almost no attention. It is a brief note from Naval Intelligence to the Admiralty, asking whether any captured U-boats should be examined for special cargo of strategic interest. The memo does not specify what kind of cargo. It does not name any boats, but it establishes that British intelligence was asking questions about U-boat cargo holds within weeks of Germany's surrender. That memo was written 10 weeks after U347 supposedly sank. If British intelligence already knew the boat was lost, Why include it in a query about captured vessels? Unless they did not know it was lost. Unless HMS Loch Killen's report was filed as a probable kill, and naval intelligence suspected the boat might have survived. German interrogation records from 1945 and 46 provide fragments of a larger picture. Several U-boat commanders testified that they were aware of special missions involving cargo boats in the final months of the war. None of them had direct knowledge. None of them could name specific boats or cargoes. But the rumors were pervasive enough that Allied interrogators recorded them. One Kapitänleutnant mentioned hearing that certain Type 10C boats were being loaded under security protocols that exceeded normal procedure. He described armed guards at docking facilities, restricted access to cargo holds, crews who were told not to ask questions. His testimony was filed in 1946 and never followed up on because the war was over, and no one wanted to chase vague rumors about boats that had already sunk. Another captured officer testified about witnessing night loading operations at Kiel in March 1945. He could not identify which submarine was being loaded, but he remembered seeing cylindrical containers being moved by crane under floodlights with Gestapo personnel supervising the dock workers. The interrogator noted the statement but marked it as low priority. The pattern extends beyond U347. U116 has no manifest for her final patrol. U117 has incomplete records. U234's manifest was recovered only because the boat surrendered intact and American personnel cataloged her cargo before German crew members could destroy the paperwork. This systematic absence of documentation is not negligence. It is policy. Someone high up in the Kriegsmarine command structure made the decision that certain missions would not be recorded. The boats would depart, the crews would follow orders, but there would be no paper trail linking the cargo to the command structure that authorized it. If the mission succeeded, fine. If the boats were lost, their secrets would go down with them. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, survived the war and was tried at Nuremberg. During his interrogation, he was asked specifically about technology transfer missions to Japan. His answers were evasive. He acknowledged that some boats had been used for cargo transport, but claimed he had no detailed knowledge of what they carried. When prosecutors pressed him on uranium shipments, Donitz denied any involvement. The line of questioning was eventually dropped because prosecutors could not produce documentary evidence to contradict him. The manifests that might have proven his knowledge were already gone. U347 was supposed to be one of those secrets. The attack by HMS Loch Killen provided a convenient cover story. The boat sank in the North Sea. Case closed. No one would look for her in the Rockall Trough. No one would discover the uranium. For 78 years, the plan worked. The wreck sat undisturbed. The cargo corroded slowly. And the absence of a manifest meant there was no reason to investigate further. Except now, the wreck has been found. The cargo has been confirmed. And the missing manifest is no longer a gap in the record. It is evidence. What the Allies found and chose to bury. When Allied forces captured U-234 in May 1945, they did not immediately realize what they had. The boat surrendered off the coast of New England following Germany's unconditional surrender. Navy personnel boarded expecting to find a defeated crew and standard military equipment. What they found instead was 560 kilograms of uranium oxide, blueprints for advanced jet engines, disassembled V-2 guidance systems, and 2 dead Japanese naval officers who had taken cyanide rather than be captured. The uranium was immediately transferred to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the Manhattan Project was racing to complete the first atomic bombs. The technical documents were sent to Wright Field for analysis. The German crew was separated for interrogation, and the entire incident was classified at the highest level. What happened next reveals how Allied governments handled discoveries they did not want the public to know about. The uranium transfer was never officially acknowledged. Researchers who later investigated whether any of U-234's cargo ended up in the Hiroshima or Nagasaki bombs found that records from Oak Ridge in May and June 1945 are incomplete. This pattern of selective disclosure was not unique to U-234. When British forces captured several Type 9C U-boats in May 1945, some were found to be carrying mercury in steel flasks. Mercury was a strategic material used in detonators and electrical switches. Japan desperately needed mercury. The captured shipments were quietly confiscated. No public announcements were made. The boats were scuttled in Operation Deadlight, and the cargo question was never addressed. The reason for this secrecy was partly strategic and partly political. Strategically, Allied intelligence did not want the Soviet Union to know how much they had learned about German technology transfers to Japan. Politically, the governments involved did not want difficult questions. If Germany had been attempting to supply Japan with nuclear materials, that implied the Nazi nuclear program was more advanced than Allied propaganda had suggested. The motivation was secrecy and control. So the discoveries were classified. The interrogations were restricted. The paperwork was filed in archives that would remain closed for decades. U347 should have been part of that post-war sweep. If British intelligence suspected she was carrying strategic cargo, they should have investigated her loss. There is evidence they did consider it. The June 1945 memo about examining captured U-boats for special cargo suggests someone was asking the right questions. But if an investigation happened, the results were never made public. The Norwegian discovery in 2023 has forced a reckoning with that decision. If U347 was carrying uranium and British intelligence knew or suspected it, then the wreck site should have been located and monitored decades ago. Instead, it was left to corrode for 78 years. The canisters were left to breach. The radioactive material was left to leach into the surrounding water. This is not negligence. This is policy. The same policy that disappeared U-234's uranium transfer records. The same policy that decided some secrets were more important than public safety. The environmental time bomb. The uranium inside U-347 is not weapons grade. The isotope analysis confirmed that. It is uranium oxide, a refined form of natural uranium used as feedstock for further enrichment. In 1945, this material was intended for Japanese scientists. In 2023, it is a spreading contamination hazard, sitting 230 meters below the surface of the North Atlantic. Uranium oxide is mildly radioactive. The gamma emissions are low enough that brief exposure is not dangerous. But uranium is also a heavy metal, chemically toxic even without considering its radioactivity. When uranium oxide dissolves in seawater, it creates soluble compounds that marine organisms can absorb. Those organisms are eaten by fish. Those fish are eaten by larger predators. And some of those predators end up in fishing nets destined for markets across Europe. The canisters holding the uranium were built to last months, not decades. They were designed for a one-way trip from Germany to Japan. No one in 1945 thought these canisters would need to survive 80 years underwater. The seals have failed. Corrosion has breached multiple containers. Sediment samples taken by the remotely operated vehicle show elevated uranium concentrations spreading outward from the wreck. Marine chemists analyzing the data estimate that between 5 and 15% of the total uranium load has already leached into the environment. That means somewhere between 20 and 60 kilograms of uranium oxide has dissolved into the North Atlantic over the past 8 decades. The Norwegian Radiation Protection Authority conducted water sampling around the wreck site in August 2023. They found uranium concentrations above natural background levels up to 3 kilometers from U347. The contamination is spreading slowly, carried by deep ocean currents that flow southwest toward the Bay of Biscay. But uranium is only part of the problem. Type 10C U-boats carried large fuel bunkers. U347 would have had roughly 100 tons of diesel fuel aboard when she sank. After 78 years, that fuel has partially degraded into thick sludge, but it has not disappeared. The boat also carried batteries containing sulfuric acid and lead, mercury switches in the electrical systems, hydraulic oil, lubricants, paints containing cadmium. Every component that made this submarine functional in 1945 is now toxic waste decomposing in a marine environment. Raising the wreck is not realistic. At 230 meters depth, salvage operations would be expensive, dangerous, and potentially more harmful than leaving the wreck in place. The boat is also a war grave. 57 men died aboard U347. Entombment is the more feasible option. This involves covering the wreck with layers of sand, rock, and possibly concrete to cap the contamination. But entombment requires political will and funding. So the wreck sits. The uranium leaches, and the contamination spreads. Fishing communities whose boats worked the area were not informed. Families of the crew were not contacted. This pattern repeats across governments and decades. Decisions were made in 1945 to classify uranium shipments. Decisions were made in the 1990s not to declassify interrogation records. Decisions were made in 2023 to restrict information about the wreck. The people who paid the price were the ones with the least power to demand answers. The crew members who followed orders and died without knowing what they were carrying. The families who grieved without understanding why. The fishing communities whose livelihoods depend on waters that may be contaminated. And there is no mechanism for holding anyone accountable because the decisions were made by institutions, not individuals. No one person broke the law. No single agency committed negligence. The system worked exactly as designed. Except the system was designed to protect institutions, not people.